Just a few weeks ago, I got this text from my parents, and it really got me thinking, is Bitcoin for real this time? This is their retirement money after all. Or is Bitcoin just another speculative bubble just like it was in 2017, only to come crashing right back down again? Just like the first time around, there are a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon right now, hoping to get rich quick. So if you are going to jump on the bandwagon, I would at least like you to understand why you're doing it and to understand the risks. In this video, I'm going to give a brief overview of what Bitcoin is and how it works. Then I'm going to talk you through how to evaluate for yourself whether it's a good investment or not. And finally, I'm going to leave you with some do's and don'ts if you decide to buy Bitcoin for yourself. If you already know what Bitcoin is, then just skip ahead to the second part of this video. You can find the timestamp for the second part right below in the description. Okay, so first off, what is Bitcoin? I know it can be hard to wrap your head around because it's 100% digital and it's so new, but it's really important that you understand the technology and what it is and why it's so revolutionary before you invest in it. Bitcoin is a form of digital money that runs on what's called distributed ledger technology. Although Bitcoin is still very new, distributed ledger technology has actually been around a really long time. For centuries, in fact. Hundreds of years ago, on an island in Micronesia called Yap, the widely accepted form of money on that island were these large, heavy stones made of limestone. And literally these stone coins were so heavy that they just sat in places all around the island, but they were never moved. Even when the owners of the coins changed, if they bought and sold things. Everyone on the island knew who owned which coin, so it was public knowledge. And whenever two people wanted to transact, they would basically just announce the change in ownership to everyone on the island. Everyone would then update their mental notes, their knowledge of who the coin belonged to. So imagine there's this huge 500-pound stone sitting somewhere on a beach on that island. One person gives it to another person, but the actual stone doesn't move. It's just that everybody on the island knows that the stone has a new owner. So the islanders of Yap, this is like centuries ago, they were using a distributed ledger. Everyone had a real-time record of coin ownership at all times. And whenever something changed in the ledger, meaning coins were transacted, everyone knew about it. So rather than having just one person or one entity on the island keep track of coin transactions, everybody on the island kept track. That way it was more trustworthy. Even if one member of the tribe died or lost their records, no problem, because there is still plenty of other people on the island who have copies of the ledger either written down or in their memory. Now imagine if instead, on the island of Yap, it was all up to just one person. This would be called a centralized ledger. Problem is that person could make a mistake, change the ledger to make themselves richer, lie about it. They could get sick and die or whatever. Very unreliable because that would only be one point of failure versus many points of failure. Not only this, but if only one person was keeping track of the ledger, they would have too much power. It would essentially be a monopoly, and they might start charging fees and just abusing their powers. The modern day centralized ledger is the bank. So think about it. If you have X amount of dollars in the bank, it's the banks that keep track of that, Like if you buy a coffee for $5, the bank will update their ledger, $5 out of your account, $5 into the coffee shop's account. So it's one central entity or a centralized ledger. Problem is, banks are vulnerable to fraud. It happens all the time, actually, and they also tend to charge really annoying fees for their banking services. So the main benefit of a distributed ledger versus a centralized ledger is strength in numbers. It gives power to the people versus to one centralized entity. It has many points of failure versus one point of failure. So back to Bitcoin. Imagine if instead of these big stones being used as money, we used this digital thing called Bitcoin. Because if you really think about it, those stones, they were just an idea. They didn't even have to move or physically change hands. If everyone knows that they're there and they agree that it's there, then it's there. So substitute the stone coins for just this digital idea called Bitcoin. Just like these big stones, there's a fixed supply of Bitcoin in the world. And instead of villagers on the island of Yap in Micronesia hundreds of years ago keeping track of who owns what, nowadays with Bitcoin, it's hundreds of computers all around the world, or thousands of computers. I don't even really know. I send you one Bitcoin, all the ledgers in the system will update their records. 1 Bitcoin less for Rose, 1 Bitcoin more for you. As you can imagine, if everybody is doing transactions left and right, that's a lot of data moving through the distributed ledger. Now, there are different ways to process all this data, all these transactions, and blockchain is one of them. Basically, blockchain is a type of distributed ledger where the data is bundled into blocks, and each new block of data is chained to all the previous blocks. Hence the name blockchain. Blockchain is the technology underpinning Bitcoin and many other cryptocurrencies. So Bitcoin runs on a distributed ledger technology, and the type of distributed ledger it runs on is called blockchain. So that's my Bitcoin 101. Hopefully that was helpful. Now let's talk about whether Bitcoin might be a good investment or not. Bitcoin is a mind-blowing, world-changing, revolutionary invention. That is for sure. Just the very idea of distributed ledgers and blockchain is already changing the world and the financial industry as we know it. But is it a good investment? At its core, Bitcoin has the potential to serve two purposes. First, as a form of money, and two, as a storehold of wealth. So to evaluate whether Bitcoin is a good investment or not, we need to ask ourselves how well Bitcoin serves these two purposes. It's all about supply and demand. We already know the supply of Bitcoin. There's a finite amount of Bitcoin out there, and we know what it is. It's the demand side we're still not sure of yet. If Bitcoin can truly serve a useful purpose, the demand will be huge. If not, then Bitcoin is just another speculative bubble, just like the Dutch tulip mania in the 1600s. Dutch tulips served no useful purpose. They were just trendy for a while, and people speculated on it and bought it and gambled and hoped that they could just sell it for higher. But because there was no real demand for the tulips, as opposed to speculative demand, when tulip prices crashed, they never recovered again. So for there to be real demand for Bitcoin, like long-term, real, sustainable demand, it has to become a viable medium of exchange and or storehold of wealth. So let's look at each of these one at a time. For Bitcoin to become a widely accepted medium of exchange, such as US dollars, it would have to be really convenient to send and receive and also have stable purchasing power. These are the requirements of a good medium of exchange. In terms of being convenient to send and receive, Bitcoin definitely checks off this box. Someone in, like South Africa can send Bitcoin to someone in Korea within minutes without paying expensive wire transfers through the bank and waiting like 3 business days or more for the funds to arrive. So in that regard, Bitcoin is already better than US dollars or traditional paper currency as a medium of exchange. Where Bitcoin is still totally unproven is the stable purchasing power part. On any given day, Bitcoin goes up or down 10% or more. In 2018, Bitcoin lost 75% of its value. In 2020, Bitcoin gained 300% in value. In 2021, who knows what's going to happen? Could go way down, way up. When you never know how much purchasing power your currency is going to still have in the future, it's really difficult for it to become a widely accepted medium of exchange. Imagine you're, a coffee shop owner and you start accepting payments in Bitcoin, but your rent and your expenses are all in dollars still, and you don't know how much dollars the Bitcoin will be worth in a month from now when the rent comes due. That makes it really hard to actually start accepting Bitcoin. So in the sense that it has a very unreliable purchasing power, it's still not there yet in terms of becoming a medium of exchange. That's why you can't pay for your coffee at Starbucks with Bitcoin. You can't pay for your groceries at Whole Foods, at least not yet. But given how much more convenient it is to transact in Bitcoin, and the fact that some businesses are already starting to take payment in Bitcoin, I can definitely see Bitcoin eventually replacing the US dollar and other paper currencies. Now, for Bitcoin to become a legitimate storehold of wealth, which is the other purpose that Bitcoin can serve, it would have to be a place where people can preserve or increase their purchasing power over time. That's the purpose of a storehold of wealth. Now, gold is the classic example of a storehold of wealth. Lots of people, including central banks and institutions, keep their reserves in gold. Because of their finite supply, Bitcoin and gold are often equated with each other. In fact, Bitcoin's nickname is sometimes digital gold. As of now, there is a huge need for gold-like assets. Why? Because central banks are printing money like crazy. I think this GIF very accurately portrays what central banks are doing right now. There is so much money and credit in circulation in the world, And all that money needs to go somewhere. As money becomes less and less valuable because there's more and more of it, the supply of assets and storeholds of wealth that money can pour into is still fixed. There's only so much that can go into stocks and bonds and real estate and gold. So now it's spilling over and going into Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. What's attractive about gold and Bitcoin is that it's a form of money that can't be manipulated by the powers that be. Fiat money, or paper currency, can be printed in unlimited quantities, devalued, and controlled by the government. There's been plenty of times in history when the government actually screwed up big time and the people had to pay for it. For example, in 1990, when the Brazilian president Fernando Collor literally confiscated the savings accounts of all Brazilian citizens in an effort to contain inflation. Or in Germany, the Weimar Republic in the 1920s, when the government printed so much money to pay for the war that paper money became so worthless that it was more valuable as kindling for fire than as actual currency. So for centuries, gold has been the go-to protection against the dangers of fiat money. Dangers of fiat money: it can be printed in unlimited quantities, it can be manipulated and controlled by the government, and it can and will get devalued as more and more of it gets printed. So the question is, can Bitcoin truly become the new digital gold? Can it be an alternative to real gold? As of now, the market cap of Bitcoin is approaching 1 trillion. That's still very tiny compared to the market cap of gold, which is 13 trillion. And by the way, market cap means the total value of assets outstanding. So as a percentage of gold outstanding, Bitcoin is only at 7%. That means if Bitcoin truly becomes a widely accepted alternative to gold, then a big portion of the $13 trillion invested in gold right now could move right on over to Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, making them go even higher. However, there's one big obstacle to Bitcoin obtaining that storehold of wealth status that gold has, which is regulation. We live in a country where the government can shut down any business operation with one law or just one little change to the tax code. Since Bitcoin is decentralized and it's not controlled by one entity, it could actually be pretty hard for the government to shut it down. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to underestimate the power of the US government. Right now, having control over the monetary system gives the US government a huge amount of power, and people don't typically want to just give up their power easily. They put up a fight. So I find it hard to believe that the government will just sit back and let Bitcoin replace the US dollar and disrupt the existing monetary system as we know it. Maybe it'll happen, but I don't think they're going to make it easy. Also, there are legitimate concerns about how cryptocurrency is used. At a speech she recently gave, President of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, said Bitcoin is a highly speculative asset, which has conducted some funny business and some interesting and totally reprehensible money laundering activity. There has to be regulation. So regulation is coming, that is for sure. How it will affect Bitcoin and whether it'll be good for Bitcoin or bad for Bitcoin, that remains to be seen. Because on one hand, having rules and regulations makes things more legitimate and trustworthy and orderly. And that actually could encourage large financial institutions to start investing in Bitcoin, because a lot of them haven't already, because a lot of them are still sitting on the sidelines. So in summary, regulation will probably increase, not decrease. And whether that's going to be good or really bad for Bitcoin still remains to be seen. There's other risks too. For example, even though the supply of Bitcoins is finite, the supply of cryptocurrency is actually infinite. There's new coins being invented every single day. Sure, they're not as proven as Bitcoin is, but if some amazing new coin comes along that has better technology than Bitcoin, Bitcoin could become obsolete. It's a stretch given Bitcoin's 10-year stellar track record, but at the rate of disruption and innovation that's happening these days, it's certainly not impossible. So what's the verdict? Is Bitcoin a good investment? I think it is, but only as a small portion of your assets. My approach to Bitcoin can be summed up in 2 words: skeptically optimistic. There's still a really wide range of outcomes at this point. On one extreme, Bitcoin becomes a universally accepted medium of exchange and storehold of wealth and alternative to gold, and it goes to the moon. On the other extreme, if lawmakers shut it down or some other new cryptocurrency with better technology wins over, Bitcoin could go to zero. Both actually seem plausible at this point. That being said, the payoff can be huge because if you're right, you could become very rich, richer than you ever would have become if you'd invested in gold, stocks, or other more established asset classes. So I think the smart way to invest in Bitcoin is to treat it like a high probability lottery ticket. For all the reasons we discussed, it has huge potential and it looks very promising. So it's not quite as reckless as a lottery ticket. You know, there's still a lot of things that are in its favor, but it's still like a lottery ticket because it also has the possibility of becoming worthless. So you don't want to put all your life savings into it, but you could put, say, 10% of your money into it and the rest into more proven assets like stocks, bonds, real estate, and gold. So stick with what's proven, but put maybe 10% or less aside into Bitcoin, kind of like a high probability lottery ticket. That way, if you win, you'll be rich. But if you lose, which could also happen, you're at least not going to be out on the streets. Now, I have a friend who invested $500,000 into cryptocurrency back in 2017, but that was a fraction of the money he had. Like not even 1% of the money he had. Like uber rich. So for him, $500,000 in Bitcoin made sense. Like I think he literally forgot about it. He wasn't even watching the price or obsessively worrying. And now it's way above his purchase price and he's even richer than he was before. I know, life is so unfair, right? But seriously, for you, maybe it's only a couple $1,000 or maybe it's just a couple hundred. Just be smart about it. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Now, this is a perfect segue into the final part of this video, some do's and don'ts. First things first, if you decide to buy Bitcoin, do it in increments versus all at once. The price is so volatile and it could very well crash right after you buy it. So do dollar cost averaging. I talk a lot about dollar cost averaging when it comes to stocks, but it's a really good strategy no matter what you're invested in. Check out this video to learn more about dollar cost averaging. It's in terms of stocks, but it can still apply to stuff like Bitcoin. You can use a service like swanbitcoin.com. Now, this isn't a sponsored video. It's just what I'm using. My friend told me about it and I found it to be really easy to use. They let you connect your bank account and just make recurring purchases daily, weekly, or monthly. So I've diverted some of my weekly savings out of my savings account into, US dollars into a bank and instead rerouted a little bit of that into Bitcoin via swanbitcoin.com. I've also set up recurring purchases in the past with Coinbase. So that's also very easy and intuitive to use. So I would say between swanbitcoin.com and coinbase.com, those are the best ways to, first of all, purchase Bitcoin with US dollars and then to set up recurring purchases. Then once you have some cryptocurrency, it's time to store it somewhere safe. You can, of course, keep it with Swan or Coinbase and, trust them to store it for you, but that's actually not very safe. These online places get hacked or they can get hacked. So for large amounts of crypto, you need to get something called a hardware wallet. It looks like this, and you can store your cryptocurrency here. If you're thinking, what if I lose this hardware wallet? Then no worries, because your hardware wallet actually comes with a really long password that you can use to restore your cryptocurrency if you ever lose this little thing. As long as you have your really long password, which is often called a seed phrase, your crypto can be recovered. Now, if you want me to make a step-by-step tutorial on how to use a hardware wallet, just type tutorial in the comments below and I'll make a video for you in the next few weeks because it took me a really long time to figure out and I would love to help you guys out too. Next, don't buy unless you have steal conviction. As a fun little story, I bought a bunch of Ethereum back in 2017. I didn't get in at a great price. I bought it around $900 and in the years following, it went down a lot, like as low as $83. So obviously that really sucked, but even throughout it all, I still really believed in cryptocurrency's potential to change the world. And like I mentioned before, I viewed it as sort of a high potential lottery ticket, so I was willing to hold on to it to see what would happen. As of today, Ethereum is back up well above what I paid for it, thank God. And the only reason I was able to stick it out this long was because I had conviction. And to be honest, I also kind of forgot about it and I wasn't looking at it and obsessing about it because it was a small portion of my overall assets. Like I said, under 10%. So, moral of the story, don't buy unless you have steal conviction and you can really hold on to the bitter end. Let's say you buy Bitcoin now at a price of, say, $40,000, then you have to be ready for it to go back down to like $10,000 and still hold on. Like, hold on for dear life, you know? It's such an unproven asset. It's still in its infancy, and there's a long way to go until it becomes some sort of widely accepted, institutionally accepted asset that everyone can invest in. So until we get there, I would say just plan on holding on, which is why I want you to only buy an amount that you're okay with potentially losing. It will help you keep a calm head as you ride the Bitcoin roller coaster. Okay, and finally, I want you to educate yourself. This video is a good start, but there is so much more to learn about cryptocurrency. And even though I understand the basics pretty well, I still have a ton of stuff to learn myself. If you're looking for a good book to read in order to start learning about Bitcoin, the first book I ever read on the topic was called Digital Gold by Nathaniel Popper. I've included the link below in the description. It's a super entertaining read. It reads like a mystery novel, yet it'll help you understand the technical side of Bitcoin without making your eyes glaze over. Also, according to my friend Kristen, who knows a lot about Bitcoin, shout out to you, Kristen, another really great resource is the Bitcoin Standard. I've started reading this as well, and so far so good. So the more you know, the better. There's a lot of good books and resources out there because knowledge will serve as a reality check against FOMO, greed, and other really tempting gambling behaviors. The crypto space is constantly evolving and there's a lot to monitor. So as I get more educated, I'll be sure to pass along my findings to you in another video. I'd also love to start doing guest interviews on my channel. So maybe I can bring on a crypto expert too, because I really don't know that much compared to everything there is to know about this topic. And I would love to bring in some outside expertise. Unlike during the run-up of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies back in 2017, this time around, it feels a little different. This time around, there's buy-in from big names like ARK Investments, Elon Musk, PayPal, etc. Whereas before, the early adopters were more like nerds, like computer coders, anarchists, and just, it was very non-mainstream. Now, more and more, Bitcoin is being recognized by prominent, thoughtful people as a possible alternative storehold of wealth. To quote Ray Dalio, the founder of the hedge fund Bridgewater Associates, it seems to me that Bitcoin has succeeded in crossing the line from being a highly speculative idea that could well not be around in short order to probably being around and probably having some value in the future. So, once again, probably being around and probably having some value in the future. It's still not a sure bet, but the fact that Ray Dalio hasn't completely dismissed Bitcoin is definitely encouraging. So I'm not counting on it by any means, but I'm putting myself in a position to benefit somewhat if Bitcoin does become what everyone thinks it's going to become. Like I mentioned before, skeptically optimistic. Now, I want to hear from you. Are you planning to buy Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies? Why or why not? Let's start up a discussion in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. I post new videos every Wednesday about money and investing, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next week, same time, same place. Bye for now.